Hello and welcome to another episode of Last Week in Localization, the show where we talk about the latest from the world of localization, whether that is events, news, research, or anything else that you should know if you're working in this industry or if you would like to work in this industry. Today I have a very special guest, Max, and I actually forgot to ask how to pronounce your last name, so I'm really sorry. I don't want to butcher it. Introduce yourself, please.
So I'm Max Deryagin, a very seasoned Russian subtitler, also chair of the British Subtitlers Association, SUTL, a co-founder of the Machine Translation Working Group at AVT, which is the European Federation of Audiovisual Translators. And finally, I am the Russian language manager at the Swedish subtitling company Plint. Plus, as of recently, I'm co-organizer of Languages and the Media.
Wow. So really to say that you're involved in this industry is like an understatement. You're basically involved as much as anyone can be, being an active subtitler and part of all the different associations.
Yep.
And for how long have you worked as a subtitler?
Around 11 years, give or take.
Wow. Okay. And actually, what is your language combination? Or what are your working languages?
From English to Russian, usually. Though sometimes I'm asked to do the opposite, or just create English templates, subtitle templates.
Okay, wow. Well, so I wanted to talk to you today because of a topic that's actually been, it's not new, but I feel like it's a bit more in the news again, the regular news and also our industry news. And that is that there's an alleged talent shortage in the language industry. This especially came up, I mean, we've talked about it at NIMSY already in relation to all sorts of different industries. So when the translation field in general, interpreting field, and of course also media localization. And it kind of came back into the news now after the whole, I don't want to call it a full-on scandal, but a little bit of uproar about the captions and subtitles for Squid Game, and a few companies were interviewed there saying that there is a talent shortage, and that's why sometimes on the streaming platforms the subtitles are not as good. So, but in the language industry and as a researcher as well, I find this kind of hard to believe because we all know a lot of people that work in the industry. So for you, first of all, just from your own perspective as a subtitler, like, what do you kind of feel or what are you thinking when you hear something like that, when you read something like that?
Well, I mean, it's understandable from the point of view of the companies that, hey, there's this explosion in the amount of content to be subtitled. So you could understand them at least in this regard. But from our point of view, it's just bollocks, really, because we see that it's not that there are too few subtitlers, is that there are too few subtitlers willing to work for little pay. And it just so happens that the largest LSPs nowadays offer a rate that just you can't live off. And of course, and people just refuse to do that kind of work. So what do they do? Those companies, they replace those people with part-timers and students and amateurs, sometimes fan subbers. And well, and then they say, okay, we have a shortage, but no, not really. There are quite a few professionals out there that refuse to work with these LSPs and choose to actually find direct clients who can pay times more. And so they are kind of invisible to the LSPs. And so they think, okay, they don't exist, but they do.
I see. Okay. So basically the issue is not so much that there aren't good and qualified people, but it's about the rates in the industry.
Well, that's one part of it, and the other part is that it's the problem with rates isn't new. It's at least like a decade old, maybe 2 decades old even. And so when you have that kind of thing for like 20 years, people just the problem is that our job isn't lucrative right now to people, and it hasn't been for years. And so people who otherwise would join our profession never did. And also the students, the fresh graduates, sometimes, and I don't want to say sometimes, often, they fail to find their footing in our profession. And as Lindsay Bywood told us, who is a teacher of subtitling, for her, out of a classroom of students, maybe 2 or 3 actually go on to make it as a professional in our field. The rest don't. Not because they're not skilled or talented, but because they cannot live off the rates offered to people who are just entering. And this has been happening for years and years and years. And there's your shortage. Basically, we are doing some surveys right now at AVT, and we already have done a couple, and the results are worse than even we expected. And like almost 90% of professional subtitlers said that they would not recommend new people to enter our profession right now. Imagine that, almost 90%. Of course, you will have talent shortage if people just don't recommend it.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, as you're saying, technically there are a lot of opportunities when it comes to the pure volumes. Like the requirement for subtitling. Technically, there should be more than enough for good people to go around.
Yeah.
To have enough work. But yeah, and I mean, just briefly from my own experience, so I'm a certified translator as well, and I have my master's in conference interpreting. And yeah, even in those fields as well, I love that work, but I don't work in that field much anymore because, like you said, it's like how you're gonna feed a family on that, for example,
Yeah.
And it's a real shame because also the expectations and the requirements in the industry are very high, as they should be, I guess. But it's a mismatch then between the very high requirements to work in that field and all the work that goes into it. And then the rates being very low sometimes. And actually, at NIMSY, one of our co-founders, Renato Beninato, hi Renato, if you're watching, shout out to you, he has recently written about the fact that there's time for a big renegotiation in the industry.
I have read that one, and I also have watched the LinkedIn live podcast, or what's it called, that podcast?
Yeah, we call it a live stream, I guess, or a pop-up event.
A live stream. And I completely agree. I like this term too, the great renegotiation. We should yoink it.
Yeah, definitely. Support it, steal it. It's good. No, but seriously, and I mean, this is it's just interesting that it has, like you said, also it's not new. It's been a topic for decades probably at this stage, but we always said that eventually it could become a race to the bottom, and maybe this bottom has been reached now.
It's a mismatch not only in the level of skill and the level of pay, but also it just defies the common market laws, because the more demand there is, the more money you should be paid. But we're not. It's the opposite. We're just paid less and less. How does that work?
Yes, exactly. And to be honest, I mean, we of course also track that the industry is growing in terms of the revenue that the big companies are making. And so there is more profit being made. And I think there's another mismatch there than if rates are dropping.
Yeah. I think this is a short-term thing. The companies that are not going to change now, they're going to lose in the long term because they're just going to lose all their subtitlers. And the companies that are going to change and go, actually, wait a minute. If we want to succeed long term, maybe we should change something. Maybe we should change how we think about our technology. Maybe we should add some quality of life things, some sustainability things, robustness to our systems, rather than just go speed, productivity, and then treat our people better. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like especially like at some point it's probably going to flip as well, right? Right now, it was always even people are looking for work, so of course they look also to the big companies. But if there really is a talent shortage on whatever perception end, then eventually it will flip to, well, subtitlers can be more choosy of who they go with, and you want to
I already see this. Yes, and we will be more choosy, and we will choose. And those companies.
I mean, you've already started choosing, right? So, like you said, you already go more to the more lucrative clients now.
Yeah. Direct clients mostly.
Yeah.
And like corporate people, they understand that they cannot have errors in their stuff. And they are willing to pay for quality and to just avoid that risk.
Mm-hmm. And so, as a subtitler, aside from rates being appropriate, is there anything else where you feel like that would make you choose one client over another?
Oh, many things. So many things. I could talk about this for hours.
Well, do it for a few minutes. Go ahead.
Good project management. Oh, this is so important. And it's very important that your project managers come from a linguistic background rather than management background, because it makes a whole lot of difference. They understand you better. it takes less time to actually come to some conclusions or results, and you feel like you're being maybe respected or understood, and it's a big deal. Software is another thing where you could do better usually as a company. And not only the subtitling software, but all the software that surrounds it, such as like distribution of projects. You could add some intelligent stuff there. And post editing versus what we call augmented translation in the future will be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think people will choose AT, augmented translation, over post editing. And one other thing is just the amount of admin bloat that you have at your company that subtitlers have to deal with, because when you work on the subtitling projects, there's usually something that you have to do in addition to just subtitling: communication, dealing with reference materials, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it can be a lot. So when you work, for example, within DTT, the Netflix program, it's just insane how much you have to do in addition to just subtitling.
Yeah.
It can make you go mad, and it's been worse and worse. And so that's another thing. I see a lot of burnout within DTT, and it's gotten worse.
We see a lot of burnout in general in the industry, I have to say, and not even just in our industry. Of course, I see it a lot in our industry because it's the industry that I look at, but also from other industries. I don't know, it just seems to be a problem of the modern day work environment these days. But coming back to our topic here, you mentioned augmented translation. Can you briefly define what that is for people who don't know?
Yeah. So it is a term that I think Arlo Lommel introduced. I hope, at least that's who I heard it from first. And it's the idea that instead of forcing people to post edit to fix what the machine wrote, you just give the translator, surround the translator with all this next generation technology, a tool set that includes not only MT, but also stuff like intelligent CAT tool functionality and lookup, some stuff for research that's AI driven, stuff like predictive typing just to increase your speed, and what else? All that kind of stuff. And then all those tools, as a translator, you get to choose whether you want to use them for any particular project or not, optionally. And then it's up to you, and you keep that agency over what happens to your work. You feel that the creativity isn't stripped. And if your MT does have what it takes actually to make it easier for me to work, to make it faster for me, why wouldn't I use it?
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of a litmus test for your MT. If it is good, I'm gonna use it. If it isn't, then
yeah.
So that's AT in a nutshell.
Makes sense. And actually, since we're just talking about some of the technicalities of subtitling, because again, when I read some of the comments about the Squid Game subtitles and some of the complaints, and it's not too uncommon that, of course, in our industry, a lot of people from outside the industry don't know what it takes, to produce this kind of content, what kind of restraints there are as well. Can you maybe just in a few sentences explain basically what kind of constraints you also have to work within as a subtitler, that it's not just, it's not the same as like a document translation?
Well, oof. So first of all, we have our texts are more colloquial, right? They're closer to just regular human speech. And so because of that, they're less repetitive, which makes it, for instance, for MT more difficult to translate, and, slang and whatnot. That's one thing. Another thing is that in addition to just the text, we have this additional context of the image and the sound, which affect our choices as a translator. And without them, you can't really do it. That's also a problem for MT, by the way, because they don't know those engines. And also we have the restrictions of time and space. Space in terms of usually you can only have 2 lines of text for a subtitler and a certain number of characters per line. And as far as time, there's only so much to display the subtitle before it disappears. And so you need to make sure that it's displayed for enough time and that the audience has enough time to read it before it disappears, which often means also that you have to translate concisely and choose shorter synonyms and so on. And again, MT is really bad at that. So subtitling is kind of special in this regard.
Definitely, because you actually, as a human, have to make a lot of, like you said, conscious choices, and to be able to work within those restrictions of, certain number of lines and seconds for the human eye to be able to read before the next thing comes. And so that, of course, does mean it's always going to be a bit different from. I mean, it's always a bit different from the original anyway. We know that, but I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
even a bit more because of the you're working in a different environment, I guess.
of course. Yeah.
Exactly. So, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that. I know that for you, that is probably the most basic conversation ever. But, just for people who don't know as much about this field, I think these are some important things to clarify as well.
Sure.
But now we're going to go a little deeper again. And so you already mentioned that you work with AVT, yeah?
Yeah.
And you guys did a survey there. Can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you guys do?
AVT, so it stands for Audiovisual Translators Europe, which is the European Federation of Audiovisual Translators. And we don't have people as members, we have organizations as members. Around 18 right now, I don't know. And we represent a couple of thousand of actual translators.
Wow.
So what we do is we have a number of working groups, and so those working groups do what they have to do. One is industry, so we liaise with companies. Sometimes for certain projects, we liaise with tech developers. Another one is a EU working group, so we talk to governments, we organize events together, like translating Europe workshops and whatnot. Also, we have machine translation working group, which is kind of thinking about what to do next, going to events and spreading the gospel of our, because we relatively recently published this thing called Machine Translation Manifesto, in which we kind of talked about our vision of what it would be like, what an ethical way forward for our industry to be in regards to MT. So that's another thing. We also have a working group for film business. It's called Film Biz, when they actually go to film festivals and talk to filmmakers and so on, also to gain visibility and so on. And then we have all these ideas. We sometimes talk to news outlets, and I could talk about this a lot. It's really, we do so much.
Well, so what is like the main thing that you feel like would improve the working conditions for subtitlers, and that would make more young talent want to join the industry again?
Well, okay. So there are several vectors of attack here, let's say. One is via the government, just legislation. As you might know, there is this thing currently under consideration, which is collective bargaining agreements for self-employed. So if that comes to pass, we will have more power to bargain with companies. That's one thing. Another thing is those companies in this industry that do care, that haven't completely sold their soul, let's say, they should, do better. They should actually tell some of their end clients who want to pay even less, no. Say no more often. And just be maybe more intelligent in the long term. If you pay better now, if you offer better working conditions, you're just gonna win. And so if those people become more active and understand that they have to do something, if we don't want our industry to just go poof, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah.
And then we'll do our own thing at AVT as always.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay. Wow. I actually hadn't even thought of the side of talking to the governments as well, because of course
we have to.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense as you put it there as well, with the collective bargaining as well. That because otherwise there is still, of course, as all types of linguists, translators, interpreters, subtitlers, there usually are associations, and you kind of tend to try to stick together as a community at least, but it's a whole nother level, of course, when you can officially do this together as well and put more power behind it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, trying to see what I haven't asked you yet, because I feel like I've asked you a lot of things already. So, oh yeah, you said earlier that so the subtitlers that don't want to agree to the very low rates, that they go to direct clients. I know you already mentioned just like cooperation. So I reckon it's more corporate videos and training videos, these kind of
Yeah.
things that need to be
Yeah.
subtitled.
Well, streaming content isn't particularly well paid, I'm afraid. Maybe Netflix is okay-ish, not for the top people now, but for maybe the average subtitler, they're okay-ish. The rest, no, not even remotely close.
Because something like this is just absolutely crazy to me. Because if you're thinking about a company like Netflix and the profits that they have, and also the status that they have in the world, is, I mean, there are many streaming platforms now, but I think Netflix is still like kind of like the standard, right? I mean, they're still.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, in two ways. One way that it's weird is that Netflix always have these cool initiatives that you see on LinkedIn. Oh, we have this initiative for neurodivergent people or for LGBTQI plus people. Just recently, I saw one for animators. They have this new initiative to help them. What about translators? Nothing, not a thing. Just screw them. That's one thing. And another thing is, as you said, with the production budgets, it's like 20, $30 million to make a film. And it's like 100,000 maybe to subtitle it into a bunch of languages. It's like a drop in the bucket. You wouldn't multiply that by two, no one would notice. On their side, on our, it would make all the difference in the world. But
Yeah.
they don't even want to do it, and I don't know why.
Which is, yeah, it's really crazy to me, because you would assume that especially a company like Netflix and also other streaming platforms, that they would like to keep their good reputation, not just on the side of directly dealing with subtitlers, but also for the end user, right? Because you want it to be a good experience for the people who view the content later. And especially these days, as there is more and more competition from other streaming platforms, it kind of seems like it would be and not just more competition from other streaming platforms, and definitely more demand for or like an increase in movies and TV shows from all types of origins that go into all types of languages now, which is a great development. Like, I really personally enjoy that also as an end user. But I'm seeing, like, with all this, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that this isn't catching on more. What do you think the reasons are for that? Like, why? Because for me, like, our industry is often still, like I said before, so misunderstood. Yeah. Like, people, like, for example, misunderstanding number one is anyone who is bilingual can be a translator or a subtitler. I don't know. What do you think? Something like this plays into it, that it's like a bit undervalued, that people don't recognize it as, like, people in our industry being real professionals that study and train, and that there's more to it than just being bilingual.
Obviously, there's so much. Like, being bilingual doesn't even start to scratch the surface. But I think it's, well, again, there are two things here. One is the public.
I actually just briefly stopped the stream after this now, so because I don't know on which side it was, but you froze on my side and then everything was gone. So I think we're back now. I hope so. So sorry, we're just talking about how being bilingual doesn't even start to scratch the surface, really.
So two things here. One is that we're invisible to the general public, and so that they need to be indicated through, like, newspapers, articles, and so on. They need to learn more about our job. And then the people at, like, the end clients, they also don't quite understand what it involves, how difficult it is, how much training it requires, in addition to the just sheer experience. It's a whole host of things. It's not just languages, right?
No.
You need to be at least proficient at two languages and cultures. You need to be good with subtitling software and all the workflows. You need to, if you're going to work with films, you need to be very knowledgeable in that area. So, film theory, film history, filmmaking, language of film. You need to understand films at a deeper level of symbolism, motives, themes, subtext, just because some films are difficult to understand.
Yeah,
if you're going to, maybe it is the plot that's difficult. For instance, in a Christopher Nolan film like Tenet, right? Oh, it's all these timelines. Jesus Christ. Maybe it's just the film is very abstract, like a David Lynch film. How do you understand it? Maybe the film is very rich in terms of its visual language, like, I don't know, Hitchcock or something, and so on. And if you don't understand that, you're not gonna be able to translate it well. And how much skill is that? It's a lot of skill and knowledge. And
Absolutely.
people do not understand that, and so that's why we are underpaid. At least one of the reasons.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think it's a struggle for linguists in general, I think, in the industry as well. Of course, we're talking about subtitling here now, and it is the current topic. So, but overall, I think that this is one of the biggest misunderstandings all the time, right? You want someone who's really, really good and do your work well, but at the same time, you don't recognize how much work goes into this, and you're not willing to pay for it. So there's, again, a total misalignment there. And there's like... AVT or subtle or just people in general, do you also have plans, or are you talking to some of the big LSPs, or are you just basically deciding not to work for them, or are you also approaching them to maybe bring your side of the story, educate a little bit on exactly what we just talked about, and maybe start renegotiating rates?
We try. We have biannual meetings with the Netflix globalization team, but other than that, what we've seen is people are not really interested. We try to approach Amazon people. Disney people are just nowhere to be found, to be honest. And then we already, the activists, we are kind of spread thinly. We have to do so much, and this is
course.
unpaid.
Yeah.
So we can do only so
Understand.
much. If people are willing to reach out to us, please do. Of course, we're gonna talk. But you know,
yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, like, just like you said, we're already talking about how the work is underpaid, and then you're doing a lot of things on the side that are unpaid as well to advocate more. So yeah, kudos to you actually for doing all of that. So and I see there's a question here in the chat. So first of all, before we get to that, someone called David is saying hi to both of us. Hello back, David.
hello.
And Dario is saying that this is a great topic. I believe tools are also very important in this. Some are not very user friendly. And then Rosalind has a question, I think for you, Max. So, what is your opinion of Spielberg choosing not to subtitle the Spanish parts of West Side Story?
Actually, didn't really. So I saw this on Facebook or something, but I didn't really follow the whole idea. I don't know what happened there. Maybe there was a reason he decided not to, or I'm out of the loop here.
Okay, but this is actually something I also noticed sometimes in movies that when you have, I don't know, watching an English original movie and then there's another language as well. For example, I'm German, yeah, and I watch something with usually the bad guys are German, and then there's subtitles for some of what the Germans are saying, and then there's parts that are not subtitled like at all. Do you know anything about the logic behind that? I was always wondering, is it supposed to add to like the flair of it being foreign, or is it supposed to just like, oh, that's not as important, or what they're saying, it's less relevant?
No, this is not how films are made. When someone's making a film, everything there is for a reason,
Well,
for a
that's what I
specific
figured,
reason.
because it's
Usually,
expensive to make it as well. No?
obviously, nothing is random. Even just a small thing is there. It has to be there if it's there. Usually, not always. But so if a filmmaker decided not to translate a part of the film, they are pursuing some goal with it. Maybe they want to convey some sort of foreignness to the story. Maybe they want to punctuate the hardship of that person that they maybe. So for instance, the main character is walking the streets in a new city they've never been to, and everyone is speaking foreign language that's not translated. And so just to convey how alien they feel in that environment.
That makes sense.
That would be a reason. Another reason might be, I don't know, to make a political statement of some sort, maybe attached to something. It can be anything. But the kind of, if it's Spielberg, he knows what he's doing. That had to be done for a reason, right?
Yeah, you would think, definitely. I would say.
Yeah,
no, that's a good point, because it's already this is something I should have remembered myself as well. I had a few smaller film classes, not much or anything, not noteworthy, but just introductions where it was always like all of these shots are on purpose. They might seem random to you and the audience, but they're
Yeah.
all on purpose, which makes sense.
They have to be there
Yes.
because it's all expensive. And someone had to edit it in, and someone had to create the sound effects and color grade it and so on.
Yeah, and that's why it's interesting sometimes that it can seem a little random sometimes what gets subtitled and what doesn't, you know. But yeah, that's probably nothing that we can fully solve here.
But it might be random, because it's not that one person makes the decision. Sometimes it's like a whole chain of people, and someone might misunderstand someone else. I've seen that. You can receive like a show guide for a film, which is like a sort of localization notes, and it says there, this on-screen text, this whatever, don't subtitle it. And it's like, why? It's plot pertinent. Why do you not want me to subtitle it? Maybe it
Yeah.
has to do with some cultural sensibilities,
Yeah, because that's sometimes, for example, when I'm watching something where something is in German, I also sometimes think, well, I felt like this what the German person said was relevant, but it's not subtitled, so it's interesting sometimes, you know. But yeah, anyway, yeah, you're very welcome, Rosalind. So, Max, I feel like I've asked you all of my burning questions. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet in regards to this topic that we should talk about?
But that's a broad question.
I know.
Well,
It's like, do you feel like there's something important that we haven't covered yet?
no, probably not. I don't know. For me, right now, the most important thing is it's this great renegotiation and burnout, because I see it everywhere. Those are the things, and we've covered them.
Yeah, but actually, super briefly about burnout. Do you, from your also surveys that you've done at the ABT that you mentioned before already, where 90% wouldn't recommend to newcomers to become subtitlers, did you ask about burnout there as well? And do you have a percentage or something you can share, or any results
No,
in that? No.
no, but so why is there burnout? For two reasons. It's spread like wildfire. One is that of the rates. So if you're paid less, you have to work more, right?
Yes.
And so what that means is you will have to work long hours. You will have to work sometimes during your weekends, sometimes even during the holidays. And I've seen that people just working during the holidays.
Yeah.
Now that's not good for your mental health psychologically. And another part of this is the whole thing has changed. There is more to do now. So let me give you an example. Proofreading of a subtitle file. Back in the day, it was just you get your subtitle file, you fix the errors in it, and you submit it. You send it to the client. That's it. That's all. Nowadays, there's no proofreading. It's all called QC, quality control.
Yeah.
And what you have to do is not only you have to fix the errors, but you have to also assign error codes to them, types of error, what it is. Also sometimes choose the severity level, and then explain in a comment why that was necessary, what was the problem. So you have to improve the quality and assess the quality, and so much more work.
Definitely.
And this is an example for proofreading, but it also is like that for translation, for template making, and so on.
Yeah, something like that would definitely annoy me a little bit, for sure. That sounds like a lot more work. It probably takes a little bit of the fun out of it too, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
would
say so.
Because it's all admin. It is unnecessary too, sometimes.
Is that because mostly, you think because, for example, to improve the quality of machine translation?
Some of it, yes.
Because
so,
of the
for instance, yes, no, not this particularly, but some of the things that we are asked to do, they are for MT for sure. Like I feel like, yeah.
And do you get paid more for that since you're doing more? Or like, is it paid more by time or is it by words?
You should be paid more. You're not paid more.
Okay. Yeah, that's not good. And actually, that reminds me, I had something I think that's also not new, but new-ish or picking up a little bit more is that since we're talking about proofreading, that proofreaders now might only get paid for the errors that they fix. Have you heard of this?
What? No, I haven't. Oh, Jesus Christ. Please, not this.
Yeah, so that's another very questionable topic, which might also lead to people fixing more. No, because why
Oh,
wouldn't you?
well, yeah, yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, that's another topic, but just reminded me of that now since you were saying there's a lot more work
Mm,
involved there. But yeah, briefly back to burnout because I think it's such an important and really overlooked topic. I mean, most people I talk to in the industry as well, you know, we all know about it, we all talk about it, but nothing happens. It's like I actually wrote something about this recently. Is it just has it just become acceptable? Is it like we know it's is it like a part of the job or you know companies talk about being people centric and the most important part of your business success are the people in it. Is that just empty phrases or you know do we mean it and do we do something about burnout in this industry before we all leave because we can't go anymore? It's just a you know
no,
food for
it
thought
not
kind of
the.
thing.
I don't think companies do anything about this. People do, and I've seen this a lot of more talks about
Mm-hmm.
meditation and listening to chill out music
Sure.
and going outside and that. So this talks about how to relax and release the stress, but
Mm-hmm.
companies don't do much
No,
for this,
because, and I mean,
unfortunately.
I'm a big fan of meditation and all that as well, which I think is really good. But in the end, it's also good for you if you don't have problems like burnout. But when it comes
Mm.
to this being like the fix for a burnout, for example, then it's like, you know, you're treating the symptoms, but you're not treating the cause, right? Ideally, we don't want to get to a point of burnout, and that should be fixed at the employment
Yeah.
level. Absolutely.
It's a bit like climate change in the sense that I see it
Yes.
getting worse and worse and worse. And I think there'll be a point in the future when people will just say that enough is enough.
So essentially,
And
oh, sorry, I interrupted you there.
oh, no, it's okay.
But yeah, I hear you. This is a good analogy, actually. And yeah, so essentially, what we've figured out when it comes to the talent shortage in the industry is that on the one hand, the rates are too low, and then lots and lots of people are dealing with burnout. And to be honest, if you talk to any young person, hey, is that the job you want to go into? The answer would probably be no.
Yeah,
Would you like to work in an
yeah.
industry where you need to put in a lot of work to get there and then, you know, risk having a burnout for really low rates? I think the answer is no. So it's really time for the big renegotiation.
Well, we talked about this recently, and the problem of burnout and low rates actually isn't unique to audiovisual translation
Mm-hmm.
or translation in general. In the film industry, all post-production is like that. And it's like sound editing, color grading, and mixing and
Mm-hmm.
editing. Those people suffer from the same things. I
Yeah.
think we can should
And
unite
in other
more.
industries in general, some that are not related to media or language at all, but just it is a bit of a symptom of our times as well. But still doesn't mean we
Yeah,
shouldn't change
yeah.
it.
But something has to change.
I agree. Okay, well, I think we've come full circle. So thank you very much, Max. I really, really appreciate you joining me today. And thanks to everyone who is watching and listening and leaving comments. I appreciate all of you. And I will see you next week. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.